Robert never really looked like someone who would break your heart. He had that calm, steady face, the kind that made you believe in promises even when you should have known better. The night I met him, it wasn't love at first sight. It was something heavier, something like fate dragging me by the wrist. Enid stood next to him, her laughter like tiny bells, bright and clear. She didn't notice me at first. No one ever did when she was around. Enid had this shine about her, like the world bent a little just to see her smile. Robert wasn't looking at her that night though. He was looking at me. Back then, things were simpler. We were just four people trying to outrun the boredom of our small town. Terrell, who always carried a joke in his back pocket. Elnora, who dressed like she was always leaving for somewhere better. Me too serious for my own good. And Robert, who seemed to find his reflection in my eyes. We would meet at the old diner on Lincoln Street, cramming ourselves into a booth made for two, ordering greasy fries and bottomless coffee. Those nights, it felt like we were invincible, like the future couldn't touch us. But then Robert started talking about forever. And when he did, his eyes drifted toward Enid without him realizing. Little things at first. How he laughed louder at her jokes. How he found reasons to sit beside her instead of across from me. I noticed, but I told myself it was nothing. You don't burn down a house because a window's cracked. Still, every time he smiled at her, a tiny crack formed in me too. Quiet and mean, Elnora caught on faster than I did. She always had a nose for these kinds of messes. One night after Robert dropped us off at my place, she stayed behind. She leaned against my car, lit a cigarette. She never really smoked, and said, "You better watch it, girl. Enid's the kind of pretty men make bad decisions for." I laughed it off, told her she was being dramatic. But I kept that warning tucked in the back of my mind, like a splinter. You can't dig out. It all came undone on a Friday night. The diner was half empty, and it should have been one of those nights we'd remember fondly. Terrell was telling some ridiculous story about getting chased by a goose as a kid, and everyone was laughing, except me. I was too busy watching Robert watching Enid. He didn't even notice when I spilled my coffee, too busy memorizing the curve of her smile. I knew then, it wasn't just harmless anymore. It was the kind of thing that changes everything. Later, when we walked to the parking lot, Robert pulled me aside. His hand was warm around my wrist, the way it used to be when we were just us, before everything got complicated. He said my name so softly, like he was about to break something precious. "I need to tell you something," he said, but I already knew. I looked over his shoulder at Enid, who was laughing with Terrell by the curb, unaware, innocent in the worst way. I thought maybe if I spoke first, it would hurt less. I thought if I handed him the pieces of my heart before he asked for them, it wouldn't feel so much like a theft. "You love her," I said. No accusation, just the truth, laid bare between us. His silence was an answer. His eyes, full of guilt and something raw, were another dot in that moment. Everything inside me shifted. I could have fought for him. I could have made a scene, begged, cried, hated. But instead, I smiled. A smile so calm it scared even me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the little silver locket he'd given me last Christmas. I pressed it into his hand, closed his fingers around it. "You said she's your future," I whispered, the words tasting like iron. "So here, take my past with you." The air between us felt heavier after that. Robert stood there like he wanted to say something, like maybe he was still trying to find a way to make it all make sense. But there's only so much you can explain when love shifts from one heart to another. I didn't wait for him to find his words. I turned around, walked straight to my car, and drove off into a night that suddenly didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. The streetlights blurred into gold streaks against my windshield, and the farther I got from him, the clearer my mind became. I didn't cry. Not that night. Not even when I parked outside my house and sat there staring at my hands on the steering wheel, feeling like a guest in my own skin. The tears would come later, when no one was looking. For now, there was only the deep, hollow ache of being replaced by someone you once called a friend. Elnora called around midnight. I let it ring, twice before answering. "You good?" she asked, her voice sharp and low, like she already knew the answer. I told her I was fine, because that's what you say when you're not. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push either. She just said, "Come over. I've got whiskey," and no judgment. I didn't even think about it. I just grabbed my keys, again and drove because the silence in my house was too loud to sit with. When I got to Elnora's apartment, she was sitting cross-legged on her ratty old couch, 2 glasses waiting on the table. She handed me one without a word, and for a while we just sat there, drinking in silence. Finally, she said, "You gonna tell me or you want me to guess?" I shook my head, a bitter laugh slipping out. "It's over." He chose her. Elnora didn't look surprised. She just nodded, like she'd been expecting this. People like Robert, they get blinded by the easy shine. You were the slow burn. You were the kind of fire he didn't know how to hold. I stared at the whiskey swirling in my glass. "I don't hate him," I said quietly, almost more to myself than to her. "I should, but I don't." She leaned back against the couch, her eyes softening. "You don't hate him because you're not built for hate. But you gotta stop loving people who don't know how to love you back." The words sat heavy between us. I knew she was right. I just didn't know how to turn that kind of knowing into action. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, after too many glasses and too much silence, Elnora pulled a blanket over me and let me crash on her couch. I drifted off to sleep with the vague sense that the world was shifting beneath my feet, rearranging itself into a shape I wouldn't recognize in the morning. And sure enough, when the sun rose, nothing felt the same. My phone buzzed with a message from Terrell. "You okay? Heard some things last night. Call me if you need." I stared at the screen for a long time before tossing the phone face down. There were going to be a lot of people feeling sorry for me, whispering about me behind my back, wondering how I didn't see it coming. I didn't want their pity. I wanted my own damn dignity. By noon, I was back at my place, showered and dressed like I had somewhere important to be, even if I didn't. I couldn't sit around mourning something that was already gone. Robert had made his choice. Enid, whether she meant to or not, had helped him make it. And me? I decided right then that if I had to bury the past, I was going to do it on my own terms. I just didn't know yet that the past wasn't going to let me walk away so easily. It started with a knock on my door that evening, sharp and impatient. I thought about ignoring it, letting whoever it was think I wasn't home. But something in me, maybe the part still tangled up in yesterday, made me open it anyway. And there, he was, Robert, looking like hell. His hair a mess, shirt wrinkled, eyes red like he hadn't slept. For a second, neither of us said a word. The world outside seemed to hold its breath. "I need to talk to you," he said finally, voice rough. I should have slammed the door in his face. I should have laughed and turned away. But instead, I stepped aside and let him in, hating myself a little more with every second that passed. He stood in the middle of my living room, looking small in a way I'd never seen before. Robert had always been the guy who knew where he was going, what he wanted, but now he looked like a boy who had wandered too far and didn't know how to get back. "I screwed up," he said, dragging a hand through his hair. "I didn't mean for it to happen." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, heart locked behind every bone in my chest. "You didn't mean to fall in love with her?" He flinched. "Good. Let him feel it. Let him sit in it." "I didn't even realize what was happening until it was too late," he said, stepping closer like that would fix anything. "You and me, we were good. We were real. But Enid, she made me feel like I could be something more." The honesty of it stung worse than a lie. I could have dealt with a lie. I swallowed hard, keeping my face stone cold. "Then why are you here?" Robert shook his head like he didn't know either. "Because I miss you. Because maybe I made a mistake." A bitter laugh clawed out of my throat. "You didn't make a mistake, Robert. You made a choice." He came closer again, hands reaching, like he thought he could touch something still left between us. "I thought you were my anchor, but maybe you were supposed to be my wings." The words might have worked once. Hell, a week ago, I might have crumbled right into him. But tonight, they just sounded desperate, weak, not enough. "You don't get to come back just because the grass isn't as green as you thought," I said, voice steady even though my hands were trembling. "You don't get to treat me like second place." Robert's face crumpled, a slow collapse. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was scared. I thought if I stayed with you, I'd stay the same, that I'd never be more than this." I stared at him for a long moment, feeling something inside me settle. Not anger, not hate, just a cold, clear kind of understanding. "You were right," I said quietly. "You won't stay the same. You're going to change, but not with me." He looked like he wanted to argue, to beg, to erase the last few weeks like they never happened. But we both knew it was too late. There's A kind of break you can't come back from. A kind of trust that, once shattered, cuts deeper every time you try to pick it up. He turned to leave, and for a second, I almost called out to him. Almost. But I didn't. I let him walk out the door. And this time, I locked it behind him. I stood there for a long time after he was gone, the house to quiet, the air to still. I should have felt victorious, strong, free, but all I felt was empty, and somewhere deep inside that emptiness, a small, bitter seed of something new started to grow. Not hate, not regret, just the first small taste of the woman I was going to become. The one who wouldn't let love wreck her twice. The days that followed blurred together, heavy and slow, like walking through mud. People around town started noticing. You can always tell when the gossip starts. They look at you a little too long, speak a little too softly when you walk past. Terrell showed up at my door 2 days later, hands in his jacket pockets, looking like he had something heavy to unload. Got a minute? He asked. I nodded, because with Terrell, it was always better to just hear him out. We sat on the front porch, the late afternoon sun sliding low across the sky. For a while, he didn't say anything, just tapped his foot against the old wooden steps. Finally, he spoke. Robert's been showing up at the diner, he said, looking like hell, asking about you. I stared out at the road, watching cars roll by like pieces of someone else's life. Let him look, I muttered. Doesn't change anything. Terrell glanced over at me, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. He messed up, and he knows it. But you're handling this like a damn queen. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe I looked strong from the outside, even if I still felt like a broken thing inside my chest. He made his choice, I said, more to remind myself than him. Terrell leaned back on his elbows, looking up at the sky. Funny thing about choices, he said. They don't erase the consequences. The next few weeks passed in strange new patterns. I stopped going to the diner, found new places to drink my coffee, places where I didn't have to see Robert's ghost staring at me from across the room. I busied myself with work, with fixing up the small garden in my backyard, with anything. That kept my hands busy and my mind quiet, but pain has a way of finding you, even when you think you've outrun it. It found me late one night when Enid showed up at my door, mascara smudged, hair a mess, looking like a porcelain doll someone had dropped. I opened the door, stunned, silent. We hadn't spoken since that night at the diner, since the betrayal neither of us had the guts to talk about. Can I come in? She asked, voice trembling. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She stood there in the middle of my living room, hands wringing the hem of her shirt. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, it's not what you think. I laughed, a cold, brittle sound. It's exactly what I think, Enid. You and Robert. Congratulations, by the way. Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. He left me, she said. Said he needed to fix things with you. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because I wanted him back, not anymore, but because of the way she said it, like she believed she had lost something important. You don't get to come here and cry to me, I said, voice shaking now. You made your choice too. Enid dropped onto the couch like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. I never wanted him like that. It just happened. I wanted to scream at her, tell her that love doesn't just happen. Betrayal doesn't just happen. You make choices. You cross lines. You break things and then pretend you didn't mean to. Instead, I stood there, feeling the last of whatever friendship we had slip away. You and Robert deserve each other, I said finally. Both of you wanted something easy, something pretty. Well, now you get to live with it. She sobbed then, messy and loud, but I didn't move to comfort her. Maybe that made me cold. Maybe it made me human. Either way, I didn't care. After a while, she pulled herself together, wiped her face with the sleeve of her shirt, and stumbled toward the door. She hesitated before leaving, like she wanted to say something else, something that would somehow make all of this better. But there are no magic words for betrayal. She left without looking back. I closed the door, locked it again, and leaned against it, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. I realized then that the past wasn't something you could hand over and be done with. It lingered. It rotted. It tried to claw its way back into your chest when you weren't looking. But I was looking now, and I was ready. The next morning came in cold and gray, the sky hanging low like it wanted to crush everything underneath it. I stood at the window with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, staring out at the street like it might offer some answer I hadn't found yet. My phone buzzed again. Robert, second missed call today. I let it ring. I had nothing left to say that would make either of us feel better. By noon, Terrell was back, pounding on my door like the world was on fire. When I opened it, he didn't even say hello. He just shoved a folded piece of paper into my hand. You need to see this, he said. Inside was a letter. No, not a letter, more like a confession. The words scribbled in Robert's rushed, familiar handwriting. I scanned the page, my stomach knotting tighter with every line. He wrote about the mistakes, the regrets, the things he couldn't undo. He wrote about how losing me felt like he'd cut out a part of himself he couldn't live without. And at the end, he begged for one last chance. I stared at the paper, my hands shaking. It was too late for words, too late for sorry. And it wasn't anger burning in my chest anymore. It was something colder, something heavier. I can't do this, I said, crumpling the letter in my fist. I can't be the girl who waits around hoping he finally chooses her right. Terrell nodded, looking at me like he was proud, but also like he knew this kind of strength came at a cost. Good, he said, because you deserve someone who doesn't have to lose you to realize what they had. I didn't answer. I just grabbed my jacket and my keys. I needed to get out, to breathe, to feel the world beyond these four suffocating walls. Terrell didn't ask questions. He just followed me out to the truck. We ended up at the lake, the one we used to sneak out to as kids, when the summer nights were too heavy to sleep through. It was deserted this time of year, the water dark and still, the trees bare and skeletal. We sat on the hood of the truck, staring out over the water, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. You ever think about starting over? I asked, my voice low. Terrell shrugged. Every damn day. We were quiet for a while, the only sound the occasional rush of wind through the trees. Then he said, you know, you're not broken, you're just bruised, and bruises heal. I turned to look at him, really look at him. Terrell had always been there, steady and sure, even when everything else crumbled. Not asking for anything, just showing up. And maybe I had been too blind, too wrapped up in Robert, to notice the people who actually stayed. I smiled then, a small, tentative thing. Thank you, I said, and I meant it in ways he probably couldn't even understand yet. He just smiled back, bumped his shoulder against mine like we were kids again, and said, you're welcome, future heartbreaker. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized I didn't feel as hollow anymore. The ache was still there, sure, but it was quieter, like a song fading out. And for the first time, I wasn't holding on to the past like it was the only thing keeping me upright. I was letting go, and somewhere out there, Robert and Enid were probably still trying to figure out why everything felt so empty, even though they had each other. But that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. 2 weeks passed, and Robert's name stopped coming up in conversations. Not because people forgot, but because they realized I wasn't breaking like they thought I would. They expected wreckage. What they got was reinvention. I picked up extra shifts at work, saved every dollar like it was a weapon, and started planning the kind of life where I didn't have to look over my shoulder wondering who would leave next. Every day I got a little stronger, a little harder, a little less willing to hand my heart over like a free sample. Then one evening, while I was locking up the little bookstore where I worked, I heard his voice behind me. Hey, Robert said, almost too softly to hear. I didn't turn around at first. I finished locking the door, shoved the key into my pocket, and took a deep breath before facing him. He looked worse than before, thinner, tired, like life had been kicking him in the ribs since the last time I saw him. A small part of me, the old part, ached for him. But the new part, the part I'd fought so damn hard to build, stood taller. What do you want, Robert? I asked, voice sharper than I intended. He shifted awkwardly, hands stuffed into his jacket pockets. I just wanted to see you, talk to you, explain. I almost laughed. Explain. As if there were magic words that could sweep away betrayal like dust. As if all it took was an apology for the nights I spent staring at the ceiling, wondering why I wasn't enough. You already said everything you needed to, I said. You said it when you looked at her like she was the sun, and I was just the shadow standing in the way. He flinched at that. Good. Let it sink in. I was scared, he said, voice cracking. Scared of staying the same. Scared of missing out. And what did you miss, Robert? I asked, stepping closer now, feeling the fury I had buried start to rise. You missed loyalty. You missed a girl who would have stood in every storm with you, even the ones you started yourself. You missed out on a future that didn't need glitter to shine. His eyes were glassy, full of a sadness that didn't move me anymore. I miss you, he whispered. I miss us. I shook my head slowly, a sad smile pulling at my lips. You don't miss me. You miss the version of me that still believed you deserved her. He reached out then, like he could still fix it. But I stepped back. Space had become my armor. Distance had become my salvation. You made your choice, I said, my voice steady. Now live with it. I turned my back to him and walked to my car, not daring to look back, not even when I heard his breath hitch, not even when I heard his footsteps retreating into the night. When I slid into the driver's seat, I sat there, for a minute, staring at the wheel, feeling something powerful hum beneath my skin. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't heartbreak. It was freedom, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I realized I didn't need Robert's love to be whole. I didn't need anyone's love but my own. I started the engine, rolled down the windows, and let the cold night air rush in. The past was behind me, crumpled and burning. The road ahead was mine, and mine alone. The next few days tasted like new air, like stepping out of a house you didn't realize was burning until you were free of it. I changed little things first. New coffee shop, new routes to work, even new music blasting from my car speakers. It wasn't about forgetting him anymore. It was about remembering me. Terrell noticed the change too. He showed up one night with 2 cartons of Chinese takeout and a 6-pack, like it was some kind of silent celebration. We sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by the mess of our dinner, and for once, we didn't talk about Robert at all. You ever think about leaving this town? I asked him between bites of fried rice. Terrell laughed, mouth full. Girl, I dream about it every damn night. Then why haven't you? He shrugged, setting down his beer. Guess I was waiting for the right reason. I didn't ask what he meant. Some truths don't need to be said out loud. They hang there, heavy and patient, waiting for the right moment to bloom. Later, after we cleaned up, he stood in the doorway, keys jingling in his hand, and said, "You're not stuck, you know. You're just scared, like the rest of us." I watched him walk down the steps and realized he wasn't wrong. Fear wasn't a chain, it was a choice. And maybe it was time to choose differently. The next morning, I put in for time off at work. Not permanent, just enough to catch my breath somewhere else. Enough to remind myself there was a world beyond the tiny cage. I had let Robert and Enid and my own doubts build around me. Packing was easy. I didn't need much. Just clothes, some books, my favorite worn-out sneakers, and a map marked with places I hadn't been yet. I didn't tell many people, only Elnora, who met me at the gas station before I left. She leaned against her car, arms crossed, that sly grin on her face. "Look at you," she said, running towards something instead of away from it for once. I hugged her, hard and fast, surprised at how real it felt. Not like the clumsy, brittle friendships I used to hoard, but something that had been burned clean by fire and still survived. "Take care of yourself," I said. "You too, heartbreak queen," she teased, winking. The drive felt endless in the best way. Miles and miles of empty roads, old songs on the radio, windows down, hair whipping around my face. I stopped wherever I felt like it, small diners, roadside attractions, dusty bookstores where nobody knew my name, and somewhere out there, between the broken towns and the endless fields, I realized something important. I had been waiting for someone to save me, waiting for Robert to come back, waiting for Enid to apologize. Enough. Waiting for life to hand me a fresh start, wrapped up with a neat little bow. But that's not how it works. Nobody was coming, and I didn't need them to. I could save myself. I was already doing it. I pulled over on the side of an empty stretch of highway, the sun sinking low behind me, painting the sky in bruised purples and fierce oranges. I climbed onto the hood of my car, arms stretched wide, heart wide open to the sky. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about letting it fuel me, not freeze me. About carrying my scars like battle medals, not chains. I wasn't broken. I wasn't lost. I was becoming. The last town I stopped in wasn't even on the map, just a cluster of worn-down buildings and a dusty sign that barely hung on its hinges. I pulled into a tiny motel with a faded neon light buzzing above the door and booked a room with creaky floors and paper-thin walls. It was perfect. It was nowhere. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel trapped by that. I felt free. That night, I sat out on the balcony with a notebook in my lap, a cheap pen in my hand, and the stars spilled out above me like they had something to say. I thought about Robert, about Enid, about the way love sometimes rots instead of growing, about how sometimes the people you would have bled for don't even offer you a bandage when you're the one wounded. I thought about how I handed Robert my past thinking it was a gift, thinking it would make him stay. But some people aren't built to carry the weight of what made you. They want the polished version, not the broken pieces you clawed your way through. They want the shine, not the scars, and maybe that's okay, because the right ones, they'll know. The scars are the best part. They'll understand that love isn't built in the easy places. It's built in the broken ones, the jagged ones, the ones you survive and stitch back together with your own trembling hands. The notebook filled up fast, page after page of words I didn't even know were inside me. Not poems, not letters, just truth. Ugly, messy, brilliant truth. At some point, I looked up and realized the sky was bleeding into morning, all pale gold and soft pink at the edges. A new day, a clean one. I packed up the car again and hit the road before most of the town even woke up. I didn't have a destination. Didn't need one. Every mile put more distance between me and the girl who once thought love had to be begged for, had to be earned by breaking herself into pieces small enough for someone else to hold. Not anymore. Now, I belong to myself, fully, fiercely, and maybe someday, someone would love me in the way I deserved without conditions, without comparisons, without needing me to bleed just to prove my worth. But until then, it was enough to know that I survived, that I walked through fire and didn't come out ashes, that I handed him my past and took back my future.